A lot of organizations don't get to the level of insights that they need from their organization because they're stuck in spreadsheets. And a spreadsheet is really hard to kind of display and recap your organization. The core HR system has so much more data than what you just described: name, title, location, phone number, email, those types of things that traditionally have been represented inside an org chart. It's kind of trapped there.
The days of having a 3 to 5 year plan are gone, right? Things are just changing so rapidly with AI, but AI aside, right? Just our landscape, our economy and things like that.
By connecting your performance management tool or system with, OrgChart, with your core data, all of a sudden we could start to see what is the average performance of a team against another team.
98% HR leaders are still doing planning in spreadsheets. And so I would argue not planning very effectively.
Welcome to People Tech, the podcast of WorkforceAI.news. I'm Mark Pfeffer. And this edition is brought to you by OrgChart. And my guests are Kimberly Henry, the company's Chief Marketing Officer, and Daniel Gavin, its Chief Client Officer. OrgChart helps HR teams and business leaders visualize their workforce structure so they can plan and manage it more effectively. It's purpose-built, automates the creation of org charts, and integrates them with HR data to keep them accurate and up to date. It's a neat solution, and you can learn more about it at the OrgChart.com. Once again, that's the OrgChart.com. And with that said, Kimberly, Daniel, welcome.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
So let's start with the obvious question. Tell me about the OrgChart.
Kimberly, why don't you take the first stab at this?
Yeah, so OrgChart, and I think, Mark, you did a great job teeing this up, so thank you. But it is exactly what you said. It's OrgChart. It's software that automates the visualization of your organization, as well as provide deeper insights and facilitates more strategic workforce planning. So essentially, organizations, if they're not using a solution like OrgChart, they're doing this manually. So they have their HRIS system. They're typically using manual solutions like PowerPoint or Visio to do this. And you can imagine we speak to customers all the time in interviews and at events and such. And they're spending tens of hours a week manually managing their org chart, drawing boxes, moving that around for hundreds into the thousands for their organization. And what OrgChart does is it automatically creates this visualization directly integrating with their HRIS and having an always accurate org chart from a foundational perspective every single day. Now, what that allows then is just more insights into the organization. It also brings in more than just the one data source. So OrgChart is a solution that, again, has over 50 different integrations. It can bring in it can connect other data sources such as performance data and things of that nature. So then again, they have a really accurate, clear view of their people data across multiple different data sources.
Can you just talk to me a little bit about why org charts in general are so important to HR? Our audience is HR people, so you don't have to educate them. But the idea of a pretty sophisticated program tackling this is interesting. What made you decide to pursue this?
Yeah, so we believe that that org charts are a cornerstone of an organization, right? It represents your people. And a lot of organizations don't get to the level of insights that they need from their organization because they're stuck in spreadsheets. And a spreadsheet is really hard to kind of display and recap your organization. So from just understanding what your organization looks like, whom reports to whom, or whichever way you say that, and just how your organization lives and breathes on a daily basis, org charts are the fastest, most effective way to get an overview of your organization. And as we dug in as that cornerstone, we started to see that it opens up a wide variety of interesting insights into the organization. As Kimberly mentioned, by aggregating data, and what we can do is we can actually create formulas that can show insights into your workforce and the way the organization is structured, so that you could understand the organization on a deeper level. For instance, we know span of control is a very important part of every organization's, the backbone, right? Is that you want to make sure that every individual is getting the attention that they need to be the best performer possible. Unfortunately, in a spreadsheet, that's a really hard thing to capture because you just have a roster of people. What we can do is we can create a formula that says the standard protocol for our organization is that the span of control should be limited to 6 people. And when you get beyond that, your organization, let's say someone now has 7 direct reports, that their name changes color. So it becomes living and breathing. So it's surfacing. Daniel has too many direct reports. Are we okay with that? Does Daniel need assistance? Do we need another manager? Do we need another team? And so I use that as an example of the way some of our clients are getting deeper and deeper into their organization to surface important insights that may just get lost in a spreadsheet. And through that, they're able to stay ahead and address challenges before they become challenges. Rather than, as Kimberly mentioned, waiting for the problem to surface because you didn't know it existed, because information lives in different places, the aggregation of it starts to provide a level of insight that becomes very useful for an organization.
So we're talking about more than just creating an org chart like you would with Visio, which will basically come back with, here's the name of the person in their position, move to the next person.
It's much more than titles and boxes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Now, one of the things that really strikes me is you've talked about time savings, that this just takes a lot of pressure off of HR, in the sense that something that has taken them a long time to do suddenly doesn't. Can you talk to me about that a little bit, about what the reaction of users has been and the advantages that they've seen?
Yeah, I can share a few different highlights and insights with respect to that. So one, we me and my team, we perform an industry survey every single year. And last year we had a survey where it shared, I think, about 5 to 10 hours a week HR professionals are spending on managing manual org charts. So we think about just how much is on their plates. From an HR professional perspective, they're managing a lot, right? They're responsible for a lot, and to spend 5 to 10 hours a week manually managing an org chart is pretty significant, right? So that already, again, this org chart and much more that we talked about in terms of the insights that it offers is always accurate, always up to date, at their fingertips every single day. When we attend conferences and trade shows, people just see our name, org chart, and it's such a pain point for them because, again, they're manually spending this time. And they see our name and they come over to us saying, tell me more. It's such a frustration of theirs. So to kind of answer your question is, like, we quantify it, that we know from surveys that we perform that, the average HR professional is spending around 5 to 10 hours per week manually managing an org chart. So saving a significant amount of time from an ROI perspective. But then we also hear the direct feedback from customers. Immediately, I think there's immediate ROI for them because it's just solving an immediate pain point and frustration for them. Daniel, I don't know if you want to add anything more to that.
No, I think you got it.
So, we've talked about that. There's more to this than simple names and position. You've got other data that you're tapping into. You talked about how your platform gathers data from a number of sources. What can the end result be? What are the kind of power users can get out of something like this?
So from my standpoint, and when I talk to clients, as I mentioned before, is one of the things I should actually go a little deeper into is we connect to the core HR system. And the core HR system has so much more data than what you just described: name, title, location, phone number, email, those types of things that traditionally have been represented inside an org chart. There are demographic information. There are, how are people working: hybrid, work from home, remote, in the office, location, all this interesting information that lives inside the core HR system. But it's kind of trapped there because the core system produces an org chart, as we mentioned, that's very basic. It just has the name and title. And that's good for understanding just very, very basics, but it doesn't provide a comprehensive view. So when we talk about the things that you could do, is by connecting your performance management tool or system with org chart with your core data, all of a sudden we could start to see what is the average performance of a team against another team. We could see, do we have a lot of high performers over here and let's say average performers over here? Is that because of the manager or is it because of the individuals? So what you start to get is surfacing of information that's very interesting, including, as I mentioned, in demographic information, what is the male-female ratio of the organization, but by team, by department, what are DEI metrics by team, just to understand a level of insight that may not cause alarms or anything like that, or even changes in actions, but it creates an information flow that did not exist because it was locked inside the core system. So what we're doing is surfacing that information, and you can get into very, very intricate formulas and very intricate background surfacing, and through all of our connections. If you have, some people in our organizations have created, they have the favorite ice cream of everybody on their team in a spreadsheet because they did, an offsite and they did a recording it. Well, you know what? That's an interesting thing that you could put in an org chart that you are surfacing to the entire company. And so it's just becomes like, oh, I'm learning something more about Kimberly today because I happen to look at the org chart to understand who Kimberly reports to. She likes Rocky Road. I like Rocky Road. It's a personal connection. But then we get much deeper into when you get into workforce planning of where are our high performers, where are people that need more attention, what's our span of control, what are some of the background information that can either is caught behind your core HR system or lost in a spreadsheet. And by bringing it all together and visualizing that data, it becomes much more consumable for folks, is what we find, and more importantly, much more useful.
Well, yeah, it sounds like... Oh, go ahead, Kimberly.
No, go ahead. No, please, go ahead.
I just, it sounds like, well, this is really more than an org chart. I mean, the org chart's kind of might be the top layer, but you're doing an awful lot under the hood. In my head, I keep thinking, wow, like if I was running a team or a department, this would be a great dashboard for all the HR stuff I have to do, a great starting point. And do people use it that way? And I mean, do people realize they can do more than they thought with this?
I think we completely echo that. I think the visualization is the foundation. That's the first step. And so when people ask me, and again, this was even in our industry survey last year about what are the trends, what are HR leaders thinking about, the first step is just making sure they're not doing things manually and they have this clear picture of their organization. But that's the foundation, right? The org chart is the foundation. And these additional lenses and views really that surface just so much valuable insight into the organization. As to the question you asked earlier, is really what we're seeing our power users use the software for. And then also Daniel alluded to this, but our planning capabilities. So I think the biggest shift that we've seen in the past several years and that we're continually seeing, and we hear from customers when we speak to them on customer conversations, and of course in my role doing market research, product research and advisory calls and things like that, they're planning much more. I think we're in a very unique time where the days of having a 3 to 5 year plan are gone. Right? Things are just changing so rapidly with AI, but AI aside, right? Just our landscape, our economy and things like that. And so they're leveraging then all of this data and then in our solution, the planning capability, but just that aside, planning. having strategic conversations and having strategic plans with their organization, and multiple ones. So they're not just having one plan anymore. They're having multiple plans, that, to be able to stay a little bit agile, AI being one of them, right? But without having, those organizations today, for them to not have a clear view, this foundation, right, of their organization, and to start to think about weaving in AI, it really would just confuse things, right? They would not know, and it probably would fail. We actually have a stat, I think it's McKinsey, that 70+% of reorgs fail. And the reason being is because they're not taking the proper steps from a planning perspective. They don't have the proper data at their fingertips. So again, these power users are leveraging all of this data, bringing in not just, people, title, roles, and things of that nature, but when they're planning for their future, bringing in compensation, bringing in performance, bringing in tenure, and starting to look at all that in parallel before they even have conversations about an AI agent. I mean, that is where I think you need to be. And I think we're starting to see that much more from the HR leaders that we're talking to. We actually just had a customer webinar a couple months ago, and one of our customers, Baldwin Wallace University, and she was sharing exactly, the process she goes through from a planning perspective. In their world, they're fortunate to have employees with a lot of tenure. But what happens is that they lose a lot of institutional knowledge, right? When someone were to move to a different position or to leave the university. And so she was sharing that before she has any planning conversations with any senior leaders or her managers, she make sure she's pulling in just the metrics that I mentioned. She's pulling in performance. She's pulling in tenure. She's pulling in salary bands, so she understands where the employee is in relation to the salary bands. And then she's having a strategic conversation about, okay, where do we need to be in the next several years? And again, starting to think about what are one or two different, right, organizations or plans we need to think about versus just having one that we believe is going to be set for the next 5 years, because that's just not reality anymore.
I keep coming back to this idea of, well, this does an awful lot that you really wouldn't expect an OrgChart application to do. I mean, you're talking about intelligence. You're talking about running scenarios. You're talking about, all of these things that in the past, I think people might have done with pen and paper, or they just kept it in their heads. And do you find that people start using it here and then just naturally, start to become more sophisticated in how they're approaching HR because of it?
We do. Yeah. So something that we talk about a lot, and a notion that we talk about with our customers and in our thought leadership is HR maturity. But we do see that, for the most part, 90+% of customers that come to us, again, is for that foundational level, right? Just to get that first accurate view of their organization, to get out of spreadsheets, to get out of PowerPoint, and to have this automated, accurate view of their organization. And then as they continue to mature as an organization, that's exactly what we typically see.
Yeah. And if I may just add to that is, people are coming in to get that basic visibility. And the interesting thing that happens is as we're talking to these folks in the sales process, and we're showing them, as you had alluded to, what else we can do, they start inviting other people into the conversation. All of a sudden, finance comes to the conversation. CHROs come to the conversation because they're interested in seeing what it can unlock, because it transitions from, hey, I'm spending too much time building org charts in Visio, to look at what we can unlock as an organization. And it's really exciting to see our customers make that journey, because they start to get more proactive in the planning process. And the org chart goes from an artifact that kind of might get put on a slide into a dynamic part of the planning process that's uncovering interesting information, which, as you're alluding to, is just like, there's interesting things inside the data that's hard to surface. But when we look at it as a data visualization tool, where it starts to aggregate data and surface that information, it really unlocks some interesting things, from succession planning to scenario planning to hey, we're going to increase our staffing for next year, or the inverse of that, which we all have to deal with rifts. How are we going to plan for that? And this just becomes a really interesting way to look at an organization, to plan and visualize that data so that it's not caught behind in a spreadsheet someplace.
We actually have I was just going
go
to
ahead.
add a pretty staggering stat. Sorry, this is with my marketing hat on, but from the survey that we performed last year, 98% of HR leaders are still doing planning in spreadsheets. And so I would argue not planning very effectively. And I think they know that, right? It's just because it's just so difficult to have strategic conversations with data in a spreadsheet. And so, yeah.
Yeah. Well, that makes, perfect sense. Can you give me an example of, a customer, how a customer, used the org chart to, really accomplish a transition or launch something or build something, just how they really put it to use with a tangible outcome?
Yeah, so we see a lot. Well, first of all, your audience knows, like, human resources, the people that work inside an organization are the most valuable asset to every organization. And understanding them, even 1% better, can make make dramatic improvements to an organization. And so where I've seen it most effective is in succession planning, in that next step of, we have an individual that's been here for a long time. We need to make sure that we have an effective individual to replace that individual. Well, we can now, as an organization using OrgChart, look at performance metrics over the past few years. We can look at tenure. We can look at previous roles. We can look at skill sets that we may need to identify for a role. And so what ends up happening is transitions become much more smooth because we've identified people to take important key roles. And we, up the chain. So we find, person A moves to this role, person B is a backfill for that role. And how does an organization go through those steps? And so it is impactful at, again, as I said, like, understanding your organization more intimately allows you to be more effective in that planning process, which makes everything dramatically better. Because, and whether it's however you want to measure that, whether that's more effective or keeping people longer, or in that succession example, right, and promotion paths, what sometimes gets uncovered is, hey, we have somebody that's caught in a succession kind of blocker because they are a high performer that has been in a same role for 5+ years. They actually may be a flight risk for us because they may be looking around saying, the person ahead of me is going to be here for the next 20 years. I'm going to need to transition out of this organization. Well, if you can find another role for that person within an organization, that is incredibly valuable and almost incalculable for an organization to, about retaining talent rather than seeing a talent walk out the door, because you just didn't realize the dynamics of the reporting structure, that they weren't going to be able to make that next step on their team, but they may in another territory or another part of the org that you believe that they would be a good fit.
So it kind of feels like it's one of these things you've mentioned several times, that the stuff is all in the spreadsheet and no one's really finding it there. That this is using the basic theme of an org chart in general, which means simplicity, and it's visual, to do a whole lot more. It's more about the entry to the data that people have but haven't been able to get at.
Yes, surfacing information is truly the power. We don't talk about it in this way, but there's definitely some people who understand, as you're alluding to, is that this is more of a data visualization tool than an org chart tool. The org chart is the visual, right? But what you're getting into is dynamics and reporting structures. And I'll say this, right? Some people say, like, well, it's not that useful. I can get it out of a spreadsheet. Yes, but the human resources department also understands the things that are not in a spreadsheet as well, right? how is this person feeling regarding their reporting structure, right? And what we're able to do is visualize that data to allow people to make that informed decision by looking at it in a visual way that's just caught in a spreadsheet or inside their HR platform that they just can't get it out. And so to some of our customers who are looking for more than just a basic, visualization tool of just how their org chart exists today, we talk about the dynamics of the aggregation of data and how you're blending together the HR resources, knowledge of an organization with the hard data that lives out in the world, but by aggregating it, and how HR can contribute to the conversation in a much more dynamic way and surfacing really interesting insights into an organization.
I have to tell you, I found poking around the product incredibly fascinating. And, I'm not one of these, I'm not really a data-driven person, which is why I'm a writer. But it seems like you're taking an awful lot of in-depth information, making it accessible, and along the way, making it much more usable than it was before. So, I just wanted to toss that out there because I was surprised when I went through and saw all of the things that it can do. So thanks very much. I appreciate you guys being here.
Of course. Thanks for having us.
Yeah.
I would encourage people to go to the website. As you know, we're talking about a lot of theoretical things here that can be hard to visualize without actually seeing it. We're talking about data visualization. So if you go to our website, theorgchart.com/peopletech, we've just got a landing page there for people to start to understand a little bit more about what we're talking about. Obviously, you can spend some time with our team to understand more and see some recorded demos and those types of things. They exist. But one of the more valuable things that you can get is some examples of how people are leveraging data, as we've described, into actual org charts and how they're leveraging it. Because I appreciate that us talking about a visualization tool can be a little hard to conceptualize. The best way to look at a visualization tool is to look at it. So we've got examples and resources there for how to effectively use it. And we hope that this has been useful for your clients. And if they have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to us.
Yeah, I would say to anyone listening that, this is way more interesting than you would think it is. It's really fascinating. And the potential, uses of it are pretty wide ranging. So, and I would say that in any case. I mean, it really is a fascinating product.
Thank you.
And
thanks for having us.
Oh, no, happy. Thanks very much. My guests today have been Kimberly Henry and Daniel Gavin of the OrgChart. They empower HR to strengthen workforce planning by the use of their intelligent OrgChart solution. Basically, they give you the OrgChart you need whenever you need it. And you can learn all about them at theorgchart.com. And this has been People Tech, the podcast of WorkforceAI.news. We're part of the Work Defined Podcast Network. Find them at www.wrkdefined.com. And to keep up with AI technology and HR, subscribe to Workforce AI today. We're the most trusted source of news in the HR tech industry. Find us at www.workforceai.news. I'm Mark Pfeffer.